Hello there, and welcome to the next section. In this section, we'll use jQuery to add some dynamic effects to our web page over the next lectures. So, what is jQuery? jQuery is by far the most popular JavaScript library in the world. It is completely free and open source software. And jQuery makes it incredibly easy to select and manipulate HTML elements, create animations, or even develop AJAX applications. For example, jQuery can be used for finding an element in an HTML document with a certain property, like all h1 elements, and then changing one or more of its CSS attributes, or making it respond to an event like a mouse click. jQuery's architecture allows developers to create plugins to extend jQuery's function. There are literally thousands of jQuery plugins available on the internet for free that we can download and include in our websites. The links in a course ebook will help you getting started with this. So let me start off by showing you some jQuery plugins so that you can see the endless possibilities we have with jQuery. So the first plugin I'm going to show you is this Magnific pop-up, and this is a responsive lightbox and dialog script where we can create like galleries, as you can see here, and these are actually responsive, or you can, well, this is the same. You can, for instance, open a YouTube video or open a Google map, all kinds of stuff which require kind of a pop-up. So even a modal dialog is possible with this. Okay, next up, I have this one called Tooltipster, and this allows us to create these tooltips, which are additional informations which we can see when we hover over a certain element. And you probably have seen those somewhere, like all different kinds of tooltips. And yeah, this is kind of easy to use. So we have the instructions down here, and well, you can use this in your project if you want to. And next is a plugin called Maplace.js, and this helps us to embed Google Maps into our website and to even create markers and control menu for locations on a map. And down here we have some examples, simple maps, and then with markers and with even more advanced stuff. So this is pretty powerful and allows us to do all kinds of stuff with maps, and also very easy to use. Next we have this one. This is maybe not so useful, but I find it kind of cool, and it's called Typer.js, which is a jQuery plugin that types, and it looks just like this here. So it deletes the text and writes some new text, and you can use this to show multiple content in a single line, and I think it creates a cool effect. And the last one I want to show you is this one-page scroll, and what this does is it creates multiple sections where we can see always one section after the other like this. So each section fills the whole viewport height. And you can create some beautiful stuff with this, like presentation style websites. Alright, and now before we finish this lecture, let's just include jQuery in our project and create a new JavaScript file, which is where we will create all our jQuery code. Alright, so to include jQuery, we use the Google Hosted Libraries Distribution Network. And so down here, we scroll down here, alright. So down here, we just grab this script and paste it to our website, just as we did before with those three scripts. So basically, jQuery is also a huge JavaScript file which creates a jQuery, which we can then use to create some powerful stuff, such as I explained to you before. And actually, we should put it not here, but before we close the body element. So this is the correct, maybe not the correct, but it's the perfect place to put the JavaScript files, so that they are only called after the rest of the web page is loaded. And now the last thing before we finish is to create a new JavaScript file. And I'm going to save it, and I'm going to call it scripts.js. And since it's our file, it goes into the resources folder and then JavaScript, which is empty, but not anymore. So let's now use a very basic example just to see if jQuery actually works. Okay, so every document where we write our jQuery code has to start like this. So we write document and ready, and this ensures that this code can only run after the document has been loaded. And in here we have to write this code word, function, and then open some curly braces and then give it some space. So, and inside of this we will put all our code. Now, just to test this, let's pretend we want to change the background color of the H1 element. So in jQuery, to select any element, we do it like this. So this is the selector, and now we can do this just like in CSS. So in here I'm going to write H1, and now we use a click method. So a method is like a function. So when we will click that H1 element, this is the function that will happen. So then we want this, so we select this element, and this keyword here now means our H1 element, because that's what we selected in the first place. So let's use the CSS method, and in here we can change CSS properties. So we can write background color, for example, and then as the second value, and brackets actually helps us here by saying we want a string here. So we now say the color, and we want it to be red, and this is the RGB code for red, if you remember. So a string is like a couple of characters grouped together, such as this background color or this. Okay. Now, before we can test this code, we need, of course, to incorporate this JavaScript file in the index.html file. So down here where we called the other JavaScript files, right? So now we add a new script here, and in this case it is on our computer, and it is the one we just created. So it's in the resources folder and the script.js. And I close it, and now this should work. And now we can click this, and the background turns red, such as we said in our jQuery code. So let's quickly review this. So we select the H1 element, and then we use the click method. So when we click on the H1 element, it selects this, so the H1 element we selected in the first place, and then it changes the CSS style of that element. And in this case we add a background color and make it red. And that's exactly what happened. Alright, so we don't need this anymore actually. This was just to show you that everything works. And now in the next couple of lectures we're going to add some real world jQuery code to make our website even better. So, see you in the next lecture. Hi! In this lecture, we'll start to get our hands dirty with jQuery. we're going to build a very simple so-called sticky navigation. And this is great to show you the very basics of jQuery. So I will start off by showing you what we want to achieve. So here in a normal state we want the navigation to show in a normal way, so here in the header. But then as we go down here, we then want this to happen. So we want our navigation to show up here with this little effect, so that we can see the navigation always and not just when we're in the header. And then as we go back to the header, then the navigation disappears. So I'll show you again. So the navigation comes in once we get past the header. So we will use jQuery to add a class to the nav element every time we leave the header. So at this point here. So the first thing we need to do in order to do that is to actually format this navigation in the sticky state, let's say so. So this is the sticky navigation. So here's the nav element, and this is where we will use jQuery to add the sticky class. So let's go to our CSS file and start by defining that class. So where is the navigation? Okay, here it is. So let me just put some comment here. So in fact, you're going to learn some more CSS here. It's maybe more CSS than jQuery, but you know, we always use a mixture of both languages. So this is the main navi, and down here we will now do the sticky navi. So just a simple class. And in fact, I will now, just for testing purposes, add this class here so that we can see what we're styling actually. And the first thing we need to do is define its position. So far we had absolute and relative positioning, right? And now you get to learn a new one, which is fixed. And with this property, the navigation stays always at the same point, irrespective of our scrolling. And we want this to start at the top and on the left corner, so the top left corner. So we have to define top 0 and left 0. And we want it to be 100% wide. So as you saw in that image I showed you before, we want it to occupy the whole browser width. And we want it to be white. So background color, white, but with a little transparency so that we can see the content beneath it. I will start with 0.98. This is almost no opacity. Now let's have a look at this. Have to open our live connection here. Alright, this is how it looks like so far. And we can barely see these links here, but they are there, but of course with the white color we defined before. And the logo is here, so everything is here. But now we need to style this. But in fact, it's already sticky, right? So let's change a couple of things here. And I will start off by changing those things here. So the first thing is we want to change some of these things. So I will copy everything and then delete things that I don't want. And now I have to say sticky, and here the same thing, because I want these styles to apply only if this class is inside of the sticky class, right? So this is then the sticky class, and then we have the main nav inside of the sticky class. Alright, so the first thing we should definitely change is the color. Let's set it to 555, such as the rest of the web page. And we don't need any of this. And the padding, I will leave this for now. We can take a look at that later. Alright, so this is now, at least it's visible now. And now we have a problem here with the image, with the logo, because this is the white logo and we want the black logo here. So what can we do about that? The simplest way would be to go back to the HTML file and include the black logo in the exact same place. And I will duplicate this line and I will explain you what I'm doing here in a second. So now I want this class to call logo black, and this one will be the black logo. Let me see how this is called. So this is just logo. Alright, so remember this is logo black. I need now to format that. The easiest way is to make Control F or Command F and then search for logo simply. And let me style logo black in the exact same way, but with one difference. I want logo black to be hidden. And so I say display none. So this image will then be not displayed. So I incorporate it, but it is not visible in the normal state. And what I'm going to do now is to go back to our navigation and define that if the logo black is inside of the sticky navigation, then it should display as a block. So it will no longer be hidden. Let's see if that works. Okay, here it is. And now all we have to do is to hide the white logo, right? So again, now if the logo is inside of the sticky navigation, then this one will be hidden by saying display none. Pretty easy, right? So let's see how this works. And yeah, great. So what can we change now? Now we want to reduce this space here between all of this and make the image smaller so that we can reduce this. So let me see the original version. And okay, here we have it. So the margin top is 55 pixels, which is way too much. So I'm going to copy this again and just change what I want to change. And I will say maybe 15 pixels to start with. Okay, much better now. Yeah, this is much better. Now I also want to decrease this logo here, right? Again, I'm going to search for it, logo black. Okay, so actually we shouldn't put this here because those styles are very different. So let me define it like this. And here I will say 50 pixels should be enough. And here I want just 5 pixels to the top. So let me take a look at this. And here we go. So much smaller now. And now we maybe need some margin to the bottom as well. And then what we want to change here is to make this little line here to be all the way down here to the white border, to the border of this white container. And then I also want some shadow here so that we can differentiate between this section and the rest of the website. Okay, now three things to do. So here I want the margin top and the margin bottom to be 5. So I just say margin and 5 and 0. So as you remember, this means 5 at the top and 5 at the bottom. Now let's go back to the navigation here. Alright. And in order to increase the spacing between that orange line and the text of the navigation links is to increase this padding. Start by setting it to 15 pixels. And now, as I said, I want some shadow here on this container. So let's say box shadow, and we already used that. So it's 0 on the x-axis, so in the horizontal, then 2 pixels in the y-axis, so in the vertical, and I want 2 pixels blur. And now the color again, let's say we want a very subtle gray here, so let's start with white here again, and then use the color picker to choose something else. This, for instance. Alright, so this looks good here, the image. Now we need some more margin between this and the top in order to make it centered, right? So how do we do that? We need some more margin here, let's say 18. And then we can increase the padding here to, let's say, 16. Now it's just, testing how it works. Get rid of those blue boxes here. Alright, I think that we already have here what we want. And this is cool, right? So we have styled this whole thing, and now we can use jQuery to have that effect that I described before. And I will actually leave that for the next lecture so that you can take a break if you want and review the code that we've written so far. So you can do that, or you can just come with me and start to write some jQuery. Welcome to part 2 of building the sticky navigation. In this video, we'll use jQuery to make this sticky navigation work the way we want it. So, in order to do that, we use a simple jQuery plugin which is called waypoints. And waypoints is an easy way to trigger a function when we scroll to an element, which is exactly what we want. So I will start downloading it and including it in our project. So here it is, and extract it. And well, this comes with a bunch of stuff actually, but the file that we want is this one here, jQuery waypoints and a small version. So I will copy it and OmniFood and vendors, because this time it is a JavaScript file that we got from the internet. It's not our own file. And actually I think it's time to delete this old stuff here. We don't need anymore. And this as well. Okay, so we have a nice clean folder structure here. And I'm now going to include this in our project so that we don't forget it. So we come down here, and I'll put it here. So as before, script, and now it's vendors, JS, and here we go. So our own script is always the last one here. We need to ensure that this is the last script we call. So let's go to the Waypoints website and take a look at how this works. So here in jQuery, And this is here the way that we want to use this. And here is actually kind of a demo. So we scroll and then some stuff happens on the website, right? So I will now go ahead and copy this snippet here so that we can see how waypoints should be used with jQuery. I will put it here in a comment, and you see the comment in jQuery are done the exact same way as we do in CSS. So, how do we want this to work? Let's go back to our web page. And the thing is, we want this to appear, so we want the sticky navigation to appear each time we scroll to this element here, right? So we want it to be hidden here, and we want it to appear once we come to this section. Alright, so the first step is to actually select this section in jQuery. So we already know how to do that with this selector, and now we need a class name, such as in CSS. And now the section is this one, and we could go ahead and just use this class name, but we want a cleaner separation here between the CSS and the JavaScript and the jQuery in this case. So we don't want to mix up these two things, so we will create a separate class for JavaScript. So this is much cleaner, and if you have bigger projects, it will become easier to manage this way. So section and futures, and here we have two dashes, so to separate this name from this name in a better way. So I will select this in the script. Can actually just close these two. Alright, and now this is where our waypoints plugin comes in. So now we have the waypoint method here, and this is how it works, such as it's down here. So function, and then this function has an argument called direction. And what this direction means is that we can actually detect if the user is scrolling down the web page or if he's scrolling up. And we will take now a decision based on this parameter here. So if you're new to programming, we have a thing in programming in all major programming languages, which is called the if construct. And what the if does is very simple. So if something is true, then a certain thing will happen, and if it's not true, well, then another thing happens. Now in this case, we want to say if the direction is down, then something happens, and if not, well, then something else happens. And what do we want to happen? So if the user scrolls down like this, we want the sticky navigation to appear. And if the user scrolls up like this, then we want this to disappear. So we select the nav element, and then in jQuery we have this very handy method, and this is actually a jQuery method and has nothing to do with waypoints, and it is add class. And of course the class we want to add is sticky. So I will now remove this from here. We don't longer need this. So this is the original state. So when the user scrolls down, then this class sticky will be added. And the other way around, so if the user scrolls up, then remove the class. Remove class sticky. So I think this should work now. Here it's waypoint, not waypoints. And now let's go check this out. So this is the normal state again. So this is how it should look in a normal way. And now this works. So we scrolled past this place here, which is the beginning of the section, and then this appears like magic. This is very cool, right? But we want it even better because, you know, when we come here, now there is no space between this navigation and this title here. So you want this to happen a little sooner. So let's say we want this to happen when we're here and not only down here. So we can easily do that here with this extension, and it's actually explained down here. So I will just copy this and paste it here. So we can specify some offset here in percent, but I will do this in pixels. So let's say 60 pixels. So this will happen 60 pixels before we hit this section that we defined. So let's check that as well. And yeah, so this happens at a cool place. And now from here on, this navigation always stays in place. Now, you saw something strange happen here, which was this one. So the navigation kind of is behind of the images, right? So I will have to show you yet one more CSS property, and that is actually also a kind of an important one, and it's this. Where is it? We have to say z index, and we set it to the maximum allowed, which is 9999, and the z index defines the vertical stacking of elements. So it's like a stack of elements, and now our sticky navigation will be always at the top. So this element will be on top of all the other elements because it has the highest possible value here. So let's check that out. So you see right now this is over all the other elements. So it's always on top. Great, this is exactly what we want. Now something weird happened here. I don't know exactly why this happened. We lost some space here that we had before. Let me check that. And yeah, of course. So I have a mistake here. So this is the way to go. So now it will be perfect. So original state, and once again with sticky navigation. So very powerful stuff, and we will actually use this waypoint plugin later again because it allows us to make some cool stuff with it. So I hope you'll like this lecture, and next up we will learn how to actually scroll to the different sections when we click on these links here. So stay tuned. Welcome back. Let's use some more jQuery. In this lecture, we'll use it to create some scrolling effects. So, there's two things that we need to do. First, we need to define what happens when we hit these buttons, because so far they don't do anything at all. And then what happens when we hit these navigation buttons right here, right? So let's start with the easier ones, which are these two. So this is the main call to action button, and so we want this to scroll to the most important section, which is the pricing plan section. So this will go all the way down to this section here, where the user can then make an action, which is signing up for one of these plans. And the second one, show me more, will just scroll down here. So we'll start doing that. And in jQuery, that's actually pretty straightforward. Let me just comment my code here so that when I come back later, I don't get lost with this. So this is for the sticky navigation, and now scroll on buttons. Alright, and this is actually pretty forward. So first up, we need to define some classes for each of those buttons so that we can then select them. And we need a unique class for each of them. And as before, we want to have a name only for the jQuery. So I will call this one scroll to plan. Because this way, when we look at this class name, we know exactly what should happen. Scroll to start. Okay, great. So copy this one. And so, maybe you can already guess what happens now. So I will select this, and then I will say click. And this defines what happens when we click on that button. So function at this is actually always the same. So now this is a little bit strange, because in order to make the animated scroll, we need to select HTML and body. And then we use the animate method, and like this. So scroll top, and now we select the section where we want to go to. Again, all of this is maybe a little bit weird. You don't have to understand exactly what goes on here. Just make sure that you understand the basic way that we use jQuery. So now we need to select the section. And the first one is the plants. And as before, I will use a special class name, section plants. And we can just do the same for this one here. Oh, we already have it. Okay, so we don't have to define this here. So let's select that, section plants, and then offset and top. And the other value we need for the animation is the speed, and we will say 1000 milliseconds, which is a second. So again, what happens here? We select this class, and when we click on it, this happens. So we have an animation which scrolls to the top of the JS section plans section with a speed of 1 second. Here we go. All right, here we are. And this is cool, right? So this is a nice effect. I'm going to show it to you again. All right, and now let's do the same thing for the other one. So I'll just duplicate this here. Don't want to write it all over again. So this is scroll to start. And now this is section futures. Hopefully this works as well, and yeah, it does. So here we are. So this was pretty easy. Next up, we need to make sure that each time we click on one of these links, we actually get to the section that we want. Now, as I told you before, we many times use JavaScript plugins in order to do some stuff, or you can just Google for some jQuery snippets, which is like code that someone else writes and that you can then use in your website. And we will now do that because we don't always have to write everything from scratch. We can use something that someone else used. So in this case, I found this little script here, and we will use that to do exactly what we want with that navigation. So navigation, scroll, and let me just copy this to this place here. And now, how do we make this work? First, we need to go back to our HTML, navigation, and define some anchors. And anchors are like this. We write this hash symbol, and then we define a name. So food delivery here will be for the futures. And then we come here and define an ID with that exact name. And so now this is an anchor to this here. And this should actually already work. So let's check this. Okay, I click here, and yeah, it takes me exactly to the place that I want to. Fantastic. So now let's repeat the same thing for the others as well, because these two, of course, not work yet. So this one will be works, this one will be cities, and this one will be plans. So this is the meals one, and this is the works. So ID and just works. Then the same for cities. And now for the plans as well. ID, plans. And I guess now our navigation is ready to work. So let's start by clicking here, sign up, and it takes us exactly to the place we want. And now cities and how it works and food delivery. Okay, fantastic, exactly what we want. And so now you see how useful it actually is that this navigation bar always stays on top of everything, right? So this is really quite useful. We can just click everywhere we want and it takes us to the exact place. So let's just look at this code so that we can understand what happens here. So basically what this says is it selects a link element where the href attribute starts with an hash symbol. Then we click it, and this is not so important here. Basically what happens then, if that element exists, then we scroll to it, and this is actually the same kind of code we used up here, right? So we select the HTML body, we animate it, and then we scroll to the top of the section, and also in 1 second. We could of course change this, make the animations faster or slower, but 1 second is kind of cool. So now we know how to write some code on ourselves, we know how to use code from someone else, and we even used a small plugin. And so in the next section we will use one more thing, and this will be animations on scroll. And I'm sure you will like that as well. Let's create a really great effect using animations on scroll. You will love it, and this will make our website look absolutely stunning. And what I'm talking about is this. So these items here have this very cool animation, and they fade in as we scroll to their position. And the same thing here with the iPhone, which comes down from here and also create this cool effect. And then here the same thing with the city images, and we also have this nice animation here. You saw that? This is to call the attention of the user. So let me now show you how we can do this with jQuery and CSS. So how are we going to achieve those great animations? Well, to start with, there's a very cool CSS animation framework, because powerful animations can be done just using CSS. And I will show you some of them. So we have a whole lot of different stuff here. This is like really endless. Let me just show you some of them. Bounce right in. All kinds of stuff. So the one that you saw was this, the pulse, then we saw the bounce in up, and we saw the fade in. And those are the ones we're going to use, and we're going to use jQuery to actually trigger those animations. So we will now use again the waypoint plugin. So animations on scroll. And in order to do that, we need to, again, here in the HTML file, set where we want that animation to happen. So if you remember, in the first lecture, we used the waypoint right here, right? So here was our waypoint. Now what we want to do is to animate these 4 columns here, basically, right? So as you saw, these columns will have an animation. And in fact, it is this entire row. So we will just say WP for waypoint 1. So this row will have our first waypoint and our first animation. Alright, so let's do that. And just as we did before, we now select waypoint 1, and then we say waypoint. And again, we know the direction, but in this case we will not use it actually, because this animation will only happen once. And how does this animation actually work with CSS? Let me go back here. So all you need to do to animate an element using this animate CSS framework is to add a class animated and then the name of the animation we want. For instance, fade out or fade in, which is the one we want here. So all we need to do, really all we need, is to add those classes to this exact element that we select here. I actually forgot to do that. So, and now it's really easy. We just say add class as we did before, and then the classes we add are animated and fade in. Really, really easy. So let's check that out. And in order to do that, we actually really need to reload the page. So let's close this. Okay, we forgot to do one thing here, of course, which is this need to be invisible before we trigger the animation, right? So otherwise it's impossible that this fades in because it is already visible, okay? So back here we need to change that in the CSS file, and I will do that down here. Let me just grab a copy of this here and say this is for animations. Okay, so JS, we pay 1. Now there are a couple of ways of doing this, and you maybe remember one of those was display none, which we used to hide the navigation menu before, but that wouldn't work in this case. In this case we have to say opacity is 0. So pretty straightforward. If we set the opacity to 0, that element is not visible. And then once the JS waypoint 1 class also has the animated class, then we want the opacity back to 1. So how do we do that? And that is actually a new selector that we didn't use so far. It's like the end selector. So what I did before was like this, and then animated. So this would be animated inside of the JS waypoint 1 class. But what I want now is that this class should have these both classes at the same time. So this is the selector we use. So that element has a JS waypoint 1 class and the animated class at the same time. And then I want opacity back to 1. And now, of course, the most important thing we didn't even do yet is to incorporate this animation CSS framework, right? So let's download that. And here we are. So Omnifood, edits vendors, and it's CSS. So let's put it here. So now I have the animate CSS file here. And let me then incorporate it here, of course. And it could be right here because it's also in the vendors folder. And it's the animate file. Great. And now this will work. Let's see. So we come down here. And okay, the animation happens exactly when we hit this part. So the beginning of the waypoint 1 class, which is like here. So we, of course, don't want this to happen this way. We want this to animate when it's like here in this position. So we should set an offset to this code, to this waypoint, such as we did before. And we do this right here. So offset, and let's say 50%, because 50% would be half of the page. And I think that would be great. And we actually don't want this semicolon here. So let's check this. Here we go. Now it nicely zooms in as we scroll to the element. Very nice. I really like this effect. And now I'm going to do the same thing with this image, and this image should come here from the button all to this place, which creates a nice effect of an image sliding in. And then I will do the fade in with these 4 images, so with this whole column. And then I want to grab some attention of the user, because there's a cool effect for that here in the animate library. It's like this, right? See it? So this is called pulse. And now this should be pretty straightforward. I'll just copy this a couple of times and rename this to 3 and 4. So this is the first one we already did. This will be the second one. So the image, these will be the cities. So fade in is just right. And this will then be that pricing plan, which will pulse. And the other one is, let me see, bounce in up. Oh, maybe that's a little too much. I would say fade in up. Okay, fade in up is cool. So fade in up here for number 3. That's not correct. Here for number 2. So let's now set those waypoints. So second is not here, and this image is right here. So I want this to be the JS waypoint 2. So the image. Now the cities, in fact the entire row, such as before. So this is the JavaScript waypoint number 3. And then, so where's this pricing plan that I want? It is plan box, exactly this one. So here I will add JS waypoint 2. 4. And now here in the CSS we need to come back down here and do this one here for all the waypoints that will fade in. So number 1, 2 and 3, because number 4 does not fade in, right? Number 4 just has those pulsing effect. So 2 and 3. So let's check this out. Here we are. There comes the second one, very nice. This is also very nice. And this pulsing effect. So all of them work exactly the way we want this. Now there's only one more thing that I want to show you with this. And for instance, we saw that this animation was a little bit slow. So we have a way to change that with pure CSS once again. And what I'm talking about is animation duration. And I will set it to 1 second. Alright. And the same thing, of course, for waypoint 4. Waypoint 4. Animation duration 1 second. And I will also prefix this. And you see now we have those WebKit prefixes. So let's try that again. So these animations are a little annoying because we have to reopen the website all the time. So this is faster now, yes, you can see. And this was also a little bit faster. And I think also this one. So this was triggering animations on scroll. You can do all kinds of effects with this. This was just to show you the basics of animations. You can do all the stuff. And in fact, you can also use this animate CSS framework completely without jQuery. You can just add those classes that we add in HTML, and then those elements will animate in the beginning. Simple as that. And so we have only one more jQuery lecture left. And so in the next video we will make our navigation responsive, because that's an important part that we left out as we make our website responsive. So see you there. Welcome to the last video about jQuery. In this lecture we'll create the responsive navigation. When we made our website responsive, we simply hid the navigation for width less than 768 pixels. Now it's time to bring it back and make it responsive using jQuery. So what do I mean by responsive navigation? Well, this is the normal navigation that we styled before. Now, as I reduce the browser width, I want this to happen. You see that? Now we have this icon here, and when we hit it, our navigation comes down here, right? So you probably are quite used to this type of navigation because all kinds of responsive websites use it these days. And we can see it down here as well. So we click here and then all of this comes down and we can close and open it as we want. So how do we do this? First, we need to, of course, put this button here inside our HTML file, and then we need to style all of this here in a CSS file in the media query, and in the end we will use jQuery to add this animation here and also to change this button style here whenever we click on it. So let's go do that. So first, as I said in the HTML file, we're going to add that button in the navigation. So it is okay right here. So we have the images, then we have the navigation, and then in the end we want that button. It will be a link and a class that I will call mobile nav icon. Alright, and now we need that icon that we saw before. Just close this. So the icon, as before, we will get it from our icons. And we have these three here, and I am going to choose this one. You can of course use one of the other ones if you like to. So I will put this right here. And next I'm gonna style this. So I grab this class name, and where do we have our navigation? Alright. So we already have the main navi and the sticky navi, and I'm gonna call this mobile navi. First thing is to float this to the right side, right? And we can set some margin to the top of 30 pixels. And then I want the cursor to show up as a pointer. And let me show you why I'm going to do this. So this is an A class, but if we do not specify the href attribute, which I will not do here, then we will not have that pointer. Let me show it to you. So I mean this pointer, so this hand. So in that case, I need to specify that. And I will say cursor pointer. Alright, so let's check this out. It's here right now, and that is because this navigation here is still visible. So I of course don't want to see it for now, so I will make this display none, such as we did many times before. So display none. And I also need to style the actual icon. So this element is I-element. So in the other icons we always defined a class like icon big, but in this case it's not necessary because we only use it in this place. So I just say mobile nav icon and then the I element inside of it. So I say font size, let's say 200%, and then color white. Okay. And now let's go to our queries, CSS, and style that navigation. So right here. So this is what we had, but this is no longer what we want here. Let me just, instead of deleting it just now, I want to leave it here. So again, this is the code that will apply once the width is below 767 pixels. So now I want that icon to show up actually. So mobile nav icon, and I want to display it as an inline block. Alright, so let me check that. Here it is. But I actually want this on the right side and the navigation more on the left side. So I will say that the main nav should float to the left. Float to the left. Alright. And now we want those elements no longer to be side by side, but one under the other. So that is quite easy as well. My nav and now the li elements inside of them. What I do with them now is to say display them as blocks and no longer as inline blocks as they were before. So they will now force a line break, and so we have all those links stacked on one another. And let me also style the actual link elements inside of them. So a and then link and visited, right? So I want them to display as block as well. And you know, they should have no border now, because on a mobile phone we cannot hover anything, so we don't need any border. So we can just do this. Okay? So alright, so this looks quite as we wanted so far. Now we just need to reduce the margin to the top a little bit, and then maybe we can also increase maybe the font size here. Looks a little too small. I think we had it set to 90%, and we can set it back to 100. Let me just look how it looks down here. Alright. So reduce the margin here and maybe add some padding between those links as well. So let me actually see how the main nav is styled. Alright, so we have a margin top of currently 55. But I want it to be, I don't know, 25 for now, and also some margin on the left side of also 25, let's say. Okay, and now the links, they may have a padding of 5 pixels on top and on the bottom, and then 0 left and right. So let's check this. Okay, great. Maybe we can even say 10 pixels, and 25 here doesn't look enough. So the top maybe 35, and here 10. And as I said before, I will increase the font size as well to 100%. And now this should do the job. Alright. So what we also need to do, of course, is to style the sticky navigation. Let me just copy all of this, and I will then later delete the stuff that I don't want. So you see, this is a lot of work to do, and it's quite confused, but well, we still need to do it. So let me set it to 10 pixels here as well, and the color doesn't really matter here for now. And this is also the same. And we can say it's to 10. So let's check this out. Alright, great. Now only one more thing, which is to make this icon here black in the sticky navigation, right? Otherwise we will not be able to see it. So it's simple, sticky, mobile, nav, icon, and then I, and color 555, such as the rest of the web page. And now this will look exactly as we want it. Actually not, actually we want less space now. Let me check this again. So we have 30 pixels now, and that's way too much, of course. So duplicate this and margin top 10 pixels. Okay, now great. So now comes the jQuery part. We need to start by hiding this again, because of course when we open the web page this will not be visible, and then when we hit this button here it will become visible. Okay, so let me take those comments away, because then the display will be none again, so this will be hidden. And now let's define what happens when we click on that button. Back to jQuery, mobile navigation. So let's define a class for JavaScript when we hit this button, such as we always do, and this will be nav icon. Very simple, so just copy this, because now we need to select it here in the jQuery. So, and now, as you can imagine, this is click and function. And now let's use something new, which is called variables. So in programming, we have something called variables where we can store things. And here I will simply create a variable called nav. And what this variable will be is the result of selecting the navigation. So let me just show it to you. So main nav. And actually we should create a class for that as well. So here JS main nav. JS main. So, and I did this because I will have to use this many times now, and I don't want to repeat this code here all over again and again and again. So I define a variable, and then I can use that variable instead of always writing the same code. So now what are we going to do with this? There's a very simple jQuery method which is just called slide toggle, and all this does is to open and close a box, and we will see that in a minute. And here in this method we have to just say how many time the animation should take, and we will say 0 to seconds, which is 200 milliseconds. Such as here, where we said we wanted 1000 milliseconds, here we want 200. And this is actually all it takes to create that open and close effect. So we click here and it opens and it closes and it opens and it closes. And this creates exactly what we want, right? So now there's only one thing left to do, which is to change the icon of this each time we click it. So if this is the menu icon, we want it to be like cross to close it, and when it's a cross, we want it to be the close icon. Very straightforward, right? So first of all, let's grab an icon for that, and it will be this one, I think. Let's make this a little bigger again. So this looks good. So this was the first part of the code. Let me just copy this here. I will use it now. And so, how can we change that icon? It's easier to explain here. So, the icon is essentially defined by the class. So, if we want to change the icon, we can simply change the class. And we already did that before with the add class and the remove class. So we will now do exactly that. And I will in fact create a new variable here called icon. so that I don't have to repeat that code later again. And this is now JS nav icon I, because that is in fact the class or the element which has the class with the icon. So now I can make a simple if again, which is to take decisions. So I say if icon has class, so this is something new we didn't see before, and I will say nav icon round, so this is the class name. Well, then do something, and if not, then do something else. So again, so if the icon, which means if the element we select here has the class nav icon round, then we want the icon to have another class, which is this one. So we want to add this one and we want to remove the old one. So remove class and then this one. So this will simply exchange the icons. So when it is the navigation icon, take that navigation icon away and put the close icon instead. And if it's the other way around, then, well, then add the nav icon and remove the close. And now we have all situations covered. So this should work now. I just need to correct this one here. And now we should be ready to go. And here we go. This works exactly as we want it. And up here as well. Great. Very good. So we have all kinds of effects now here on our web page. Even if the responsive version, it all works the same. Fantastic. So this is all I had to show you about jQuery. jQuery has endless possibilities and there is still so much to learn. And there are in fact entire books and online courses devoted to teach you jQuery. So you see, this is a really huge topic. But I think you know some of the basics now, and that actually enables you to write some simple code on your own, or to include one of the many jQuery plugins into your project. And that is already quite powerful. Now, as before, you can find a link where you can download the entire project we've built so far in the description of this video. Now in the next couple of lectures, we'll optimize this web page and then learn how to launch it.